The scent of seared steak and aged bourbon drifted through the dimly lit dining room of Kavanaugh's Prime, a high-end steakhouse tucked into a quiet corner of Midtown Manhattan. The kind of place where billion-dollar mergers began over dry-aged ribeyes and handshake deals. Elena Reyes moved gracefully between tables, balancing a heavy tray on her shoulder. Her black hair was tied in a neat bun, her uniform freshly pressed, her expression practiced and neutral. She didn't mind the long hours or the aching feet, not when her brother needed medication insurance wouldn't cover, and certainly not when rent was always due a day too soon. At table 14, the Bancroft party was seated in their usual corner. Elena knew the name, of course. Everyone in finance did. The Bancroft Financial Group practically owned the skyline east of Fifth Avenue. Their patriarch, Charles Bancroft III, was a man she'd only ever seen on screens and magazine covers, until now. He was older than his photos, but not by much. His tailored suit looked like it cost more than her entire year's salary. Every move he made was deliberate, the mark of a man accustomed to being observed and feared. Beside him sat his daughter, Victoria Bancroft, sharp-jawed, glassy-eyed, and silent. Her black dress was minimalist, but her posture screamed power. Elena approached the table and set a medium-rare steak in front of Charles. He barely acknowledged her. "Medium rare, as requested," she said with a nod. "Of course," he murmured, already focused on his next sentence. "To aggressive expansion?" And silencing the bleeding hearts. The group around him laughed, sharp, short sounds. Elena turned to leave, but something caught her eye. Charles had taken out his wallet to tip, a well-worn, expensive piece of leather, and with it came a photograph. It fluttered silently to the floor between her feet. "Sir," she said automatically. Bending to pick it up, she turned it over, and her world stopped. In the photo, two young men stood arm in arm in front of a building that bore the Bancroft logo, the old one. From the 1990s, one man was clearly a younger Charles Bancroft. His smile was full, unburdened by the years that now lined his face. The other man. Elena's fingers trembled. It was David Reyes, her father. She'd seen that photo before. Once, a long time ago when she was barely 5 years old. He'd shown it to her on a rainy Sunday morning, tucked into the pages of a dusty scrapbook. That's my dad," she whispered, the words escaping her before she could stop them. The laughter at the table died. Charles's head tilted slightly. "Excuse me?" he said, his tone polite but cold. Elena looked up at him, stunned. "This man in the photo, that's David Reyes. He's my father." Victoria's eyes sharpened like blades. Charles extended his hand slowly. "I think you're mistaken," he said with eerie calm. "That man is someone else." He snatched the photo from her fingers. His grip was tighter than it needed to be. I'm sorry," Elena stammered. Charles waved a dismissive hand. "Let's have a different waitress," he said, his voice slicing through the air. Moments later, Elena's manager appeared, red-faced and apologetic. She was told to take an early break, maybe even the night off. No argument, no explanation. As she stepped into the locker room, her knees wobbled beneath her. She sat down heavily on the bench, the image of the photo still burned into her mind. It was her father. There was no mistake. And if that photo was real, it meant everything she knew about his life and his death might be a lie. Later that night, Elena sat on the floor of her small Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by dusty boxes and stacks of old notebooks. Her younger brother Nico lay on the couch, hooked up to a portable oxygen tank. His skin was pale, his breath shallow but steady. Jamie, her roommate and closest friend, stirred powdered soup on the stove. "What are you looking for?" Jamie asked. "Proof," Elena replied. "Dad had files, notes. I think he kept them even after he stopped working." "Your dad was a journalist, right?" "He was more than that. Investigative. He said he was working on something big before he disappeared." "You mean died?" Elena didn't answer. She pulled out a worn manila folder labeled David R. Archives. Inside were black and white photographs, handwritten notes, and charred papers. One photo was partially burned, showing the same two men from the picture, Charles Bancroft and David Reyes, only this one was labeled in her father's handwriting. Cayman 99, off-book meeting, Shell Corp. Another item, an old newspaper clipping. Local journalist presumed dead in apartment fire. No body found. Nico sat up slightly. They never found him. Right? Elena nodded. They said it was too damaged, that he was gone, but if he really worked with the Bancrofts, maybe they made him disappear. Jamie frowned. That's a pretty big leap, Elle. She opened another folder. Inside, a faded ID card for a long-defunct nonprofit tied to Bancroft Financial. A list of names, offshore accounts. The details were fragmented, burned, smudged, incomplete, but the pattern was clear. Her father had discovered something. Something dangerous. And now, Elena had stumbled right into the same fire. Meanwhile, across the East River, high atop a skyscraper bearing the Bancroft name, Charles Bancroft stood at his office window, gazing down at the glittering city. Victoria entered silently, a glass of bourbon in her hand. She recognized him, she said. Charles didn't turn. She saw a photo. That doesn't mean she knows anything. If David Reyes really had a daughter and she's digging, he's dead, Charles said sharply. We confirmed it. Years ago? Then why do you still carry his picture? He finally turned to look at her, eyes hard. Because I remember my mistakes. Victoria didn't blink. So do I. Back in Brooklyn, Elena sat on the couch, the photograph still etched in her memory. I'm going to find out the truth, she said aloud, more to herself than to anyone. Jamie stirred her soup. You sure you want to? The Bancrofts aren't just rich. They're untouchable. I don't care. She looked at her brother, asleep under a thin blanket, the heart monitor beeping softly beside him. I already lost my dad to whatever they did. I'm not losing Nico too. Jamie stood beside her. Then you better be ready, because this isn't just going to be about your dad. Elena stared out the window across the skyline to the glowing Bancroft Tower. It's about what he died trying to stop. The next morning broke gray and still. A drizzle tapped gently against the windows of the Brooklyn apartment as Elena sat at the kitchen table, nursing a bitter cup of coffee she couldn't afford to waste. She'd barely slept. The box of her father's notes lay open in front of her like a time capsule, filled with unsolved riddles and half-burned truths. Nico was still asleep in the living room, curled into the couch like a question mark, his breathing shallow but steady. The soft beeping of his medical monitor had become a permanent soundtrack to Elena's life, a reminder of every second ticking away. Across the table, Jamie chewed on a protein bar and scrolled through her phone. Occasionally, she'd glance up and frown. You gonna call out again today? She asked finally. I can't go back to Kavanaugh's, Elena said flatly. You think they're gonna fire you? I think they're going to pretend I never existed. Jamie raised her eyebrows. All because you recognized a photo? No, Elena said. Because of who was in the photo. She opened her father's worn notebook, the one with frayed corners and pages yellowed by time. On the inside cover, a single quote was scrawled in neat, deliberate handwriting. Every great fortune begins with a crime. Balzac beneath it. In a different pen, her father had written, and I know what theirs was. Later that day, Elena found herself on the Uptown 6 train, the notebook stuffed into her backpack, her nerves buzzing. She'd reached out to the only person she could think of, the only person her father had ever spoken of with trust, Cassandra Wu. Back in the early 2000s, Cassandra had been a junior journalist fresh out of Columbia. David Reyes had mentored her briefly, praising her tenacity and nose for corruption. After his disappearance, she'd written a quiet editorial mourning his loss. It was the only piece Elena had found that even hinted something was off. Cassandra had answered Elena's email within an hour. Meet me, 3 p.m., Washington Square Park. Discretion, please. Washington Square Park, late afternoon. The park bustled with students, tourists, and street performers. Beneath the white marble arch, Cassandra Wu stood in a trench coat, arms crossed. eyes scanning the crowd like she was still on the job. She was older now, mid-40s, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. But when she saw Elena approaching, something in her features softened. "You look just like him," she said. Elena offered a cautious smile. "He talked about you, said you were the best he'd ever worked with." Cassandra let out a breath and gestured to a nearby bench. "Sit and tell me everything." For the next 20 minutes, Elena recounted everything: the photo at the restaurant, the box of evidence, the burnt negatives, the newspaper clippings. Cassandra listened in silence, nodding occasionally but offering no interruptions. When Elena finally stopped, Cassandra remained still for a long time. "I always suspected he didn't die in that fire," she said quietly. "But the cops ruled it accidental. No body, no investigation. And the moment I started asking questions, my editor shut me down." "Because of the Bancrofts?" Cassandra nodded. "They're not just a banking dynasty. They own access. They fund museums, colleges, newspapers. They can make stories disappear before the ink is dry." "Do you think they killed him?" "I think they erased him," she said. "Which is worse." That night, Cassandra took Elena back to her apartment, a loft in an old brick building downtown, filled with stacks of books and filing cabinets. "You need context," Cassandra said, opening one of the cabinets. "Your dad was working on something big when he vanished. Something involving offshore accounts and fake nonprofits tied to Bancroft Financial. But I never got the full picture." She pulled out a file and handed it to Elena. Inside were photocopies of old memos, photos of shell company paperwork, and a crude flowchart. At the center of it all was one name circled in red ink: Orion Children's Foundation, registered in the Cayman Islands. Parent: Bancroft Financial. "I thought it was a charity," Elena murmured. "It is," Cassandra replied. "But only on paper. In reality, it was a shell, a place to funnel money offshore under the guise of philanthropy. Your father found the proof, and that's when he disappeared." Elena's heart pounded. "What if I told you I found a photo of him and Charles Bancroft in the Caymans? Dated 1999, Cassandra blinked. "That could blow everything open. I have the negatives. But I don't have the resources to develop them." Cassandra stood, a fire reigniting in her eyes. "I do." Across the city, that same night, inside the Bancroft penthouse, Victoria paced the floor while Charles poured himself a glass of scotch. "She's not backing down," Victoria said. "We should have buried that photo years ago." "I carried that photo because I needed a reminder of what happens when you mix blood with ambition," Charles replied. "She's David's daughter." "And she's digging." Charles sat, the ice clinking in his glass. "Then make her stop." Victoria narrowed her eyes. "She's not just a waitress anymore. She's a threat." Brooklyn, the next morning, Elena returned home to find Nico curled up on the couch, coughing into a handkerchief. "You okay?" she asked, kneeling beside him. He nodded weakly. "Just tired." Elena stroked his hair gently. "I think Dad was trying to protect us. All those years, and now, we might finally have a chance to finish what he started." Nico smiled faintly. "He'd be proud of you." "I hope so," she said. She rose, her expression sharpening with resolve. "Because I'm going after the Bancrofts, and this time they're not going to silence us." The negatives developed slowly in the red-lit darkroom of Cassandra Wu's makeshift studio. Elena stood beside her, watching each image bloom into clarity, piece by ghostly piece. One by one, the past revealed itself. A man in a pressed linen suit, Charles Bancroft, younger but unmistakable. Standing next to him was David Reyes, smiling slightly, a camera slung over one shoulder. The two stood in front of a nondescript building. No signs, no branding, just concrete walls and darkened windows. "Cayman Islands," Cassandra muttered. "This is it." The next image showed a briefcase being exchanged. The third, a document signing inside a luxury office. The final shot was taken from behind glass, capturing a check signed in the name of a foundation, the Orion Children's Foundation. Cassandra let out a low whistle. "These photos are dynamite." Elena looked at her, hands clenched. "Can we trace the foundation? Find proof it was a shell company?" We can try, Cassandra said, already reaching for her laptop. But we'll need records, offshore trusts, company registries, and access to places the public can't see? Like what? Cassandra grinned. The right back doors. That afternoon, they took the subway to Lower Manhattan, arriving at a sterile, corporate-looking building that housed the public shell of the Bancroft Foundation. On the surface, it was a clean operation. Grants, scholarships, press photos of Charles shaking hands with diplomats and CEOs. But Cassandra had been here before. Inside, they passed a plaque honoring Charles Bancroft Sr., who believed wealth must serve the public. Elena scoffed under her breath. Guess that doesn't apply to the money they stole. They made their way to the public records terminal in the lobby. Cassandra typed in a request to view the 990 PF filings, standard for charitable foundations. What are we looking for? Elena asked. Inconsistencies. Look for Orion or any reference to offshore grants. They can't completely erase the paperwork. An hour passed before they found it. A single line item in a 2001 grant disclosure. Disbursement, 1.2 Matters, Orion Children's Outreach. Grand Cayman, Developmental Aid Initiative. The corresponding tax year was signed by Charles Bancroft III himself. Developmental aid, Cassandra snorted. More like asset laundering. Elena took a photo of the screen with her phone. They tried to bury this. And they almost did. Back at Cassandra's loft, the two women created a sprawling map across the wall. Photos, documents, arrows connecting faces to dates and corporations. In the center sat a photo of Elena's father, not the one from the newspaper obituary, but the photo from the Caymans. Above his head, a sticky note in bold letters, "What did he find?" Meanwhile, in a corner office on the 51st floor of Bancroft Financial Headquarters, Victoria sat at a long glass table, staring at an open laptop. Across the table, a man in a sleek gray suit tapped on his tablet. Matthew Crane, Bancroft's internal counsel and fixer. "She's working with a journalist," he said. "Cassandra Wu." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I thought she was blacklisted. Apparently she still knows how to dig. Have we confirmed the identity?" He slid the tablet across the table. DNA analysis from a discarded coffee cup matches the Reyes family record. Elena Reyes is David's daughter. Victoria stood, walked to the window. "She's not after money. She wants justice." Crane remained seated. "Then we give her something else to chase." Back in Brooklyn, Elena returned home to find a letter slipped under her apartment door. No stamp. No return address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single piece of paper. A check for $250,000, made out to her from Bancroft Financial Group. No note. No explanation. She turned the check over, scrawled in neat handwriting on the back. "For your silence. Take care of your brother." Her stomach turned. Her hands shook. That night, Cassandra returned to find Elena sitting in silence. The check on the table between them. "They're scared," Elena said. Cassandra picked up the check and examined it. "They think you'll sell out." Elena looked up, her eyes burning. "I won't." Cassandra smiled. "Good, because we just found the first real crack in their foundation." 2 days later, Cassandra's contact at a nonprofit watchdog group passed along a file. Internal documents from an accounting firm in the Caymans, quietly leaked, revealed a web of dummy companies, all tied back to Orion, all eventually connecting to an unregistered Bancroft account in Zurich. At least $48 million had passed through the network. "And guess who signed the transfer orders?" Cassandra said, placing a printed page in front of Elena. There it was, in black ink, Charles Bancroft III. By now, Elena's investigation had transformed her, no longer just a waitress, no longer afraid of wealth or power. Each discovery hardened her resolve, each night pushing her closer to something she could no longer ignore. This wasn't just about her father. This was about generations of theft, covered by charity galas and press releases, about truth buried beneath skyscrapers and campaign donations. The Bancrofts had built their empire on something rotten, and she was going to bring it down. The first snowfall of the season dusted Manhattan in pale silver. It was the kind of snow that made everything look clean, even when it wasn't. From the window of Cassandra Wu's loft, the city glistened like a lie too beautiful to question. Elena stood at the makeshift evidence board, arms crossed, eyes locked on a blurry photo of her father in the Caymans. Strings now connected his face to foundations, banks, and boardrooms. The entire wall had transformed into a timeline, a trail of corruption built like scaffolding around a secret. The check from Bancroft Financial still sat on the table, unsigned, its clean zeros like teeth. "You could cash it," Cassandra had said once, teasingly. "Get Nico to Switzerland for treatment. Save his life." Elena had only replied, "He doesn't need blood money." Today was different. Today they had an appointment, INT, Archives Division, downtown Manhattan, later that day. The building was nondescript, beige stone and bland signage, but inside it housed one of the most comprehensive financial archives in the country, including sealed tax records, estate files, and, critically, bankruptcy disclosures and corporate dissolutions. They were meeting someone discreet, Michael Arlen, a quiet, graying archivist with nervous energy and a faded NYU finance hoodie beneath his blazer. Cassandra had worked with him years ago when investigating political embezzlement. He owed her a favor. "A big one." "You understand?" he whispered, glancing around. "None of this leaves the room." Cassandra nodded. "Just research. No cameras." Elena watched as he pulled a file from a locked drawer, then another, and another. Each bore the same name in small, tidy font. Orion Children's Foundation, dissolved entities. Inside were hundreds of pages. Transfer orders, board meeting summaries. The paper trail no one thought anyone would ever look for. "Look here," Michael said, pointing. "These transfers were executed by a secondary signatory, someone using the alias CM Redwood." Elena blinked. "Who's that?" Michael hesitated, then typed into a secondary search database. A minute passed. Then a result. CM Redwood, Charles Matthew Redwood Bancroft. "He used a pseudonym," Cassandra whispered, "to funnel money through a dead-end foundation." Michael nodded. "But it gets better. Look at the counter-signature here." Another name, Elena's breath caught. David Reyes. Back in the loft, Cassandra spread the documents out on the floor. The puzzle was starting to make sense. "Your father didn't just discover the scheme," she said. "He was used. Brought in, maybe under the pretense of real charity work. But once he saw what it really was, he tried to stop it," Elena finished. "Or expose it," Cassandra nodded. "And they turned on him." Elena stared at the signature on the page. Her father's handwriting. What if he knew? What if he saw the transfers going to shell corporations and realized he'd been part of something criminal? Cassandra tapped a finger to her temple. "That's the guilt you bury. That's the kind of secret a man either drinks away or dies with." That night, Elena took the file home. Jamie was in the kitchen, Nico asleep on the couch again, IV line running gently from the port in his arm. "He looked fragile, too fragile." Jamie said quietly. "I got a call from your boss at Kavanaugh's." Elena raised an eyebrow. They said someone came by asking questions. Not HR, like men in suits, flashing some kind of badge. Elena's jaw tightened. "They're watching now." Jamie crossed her arms. "You still think you can win this?" "I don't need to win," Elena said. "I need the truth out, and I need them to be scared." Jamie swallowed. "Well, mission accomplished." Elsewhere. That same night, in a soundproof conference room on the 41st floor of Bancroft Tower, Victoria sat across from Matthew Crane, reviewing Elena's movements. A grainy surveillance photo showed her walking into the city archive. "She's getting closer," Crane said. "We found out she accessed sealed Orion documents." Victoria remained silent. "We should consider alternate solutions?" "No," she said. "She's still public. Still sympathetic. If anything happens to her now, it will be on every front page by morning." Crane raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" Victoria tapped the table lightly. She wants the truth. Let's give her a version of it. In T. Cassandra's loft. The next morning, Elena woke to a knock on the door. A courier stood there with a leather envelope. No return address, he said. I was told it's for Ms. Reyes. She signed without thinking. Inside the envelope was a USB drive and a typed note. You're not the first to look for ghosts in the ledger. Your father found one. We buried it together. V. Elena stared at the note, then plugged the drive into Cassandra's laptop. The screen flickered. A single video file appeared. Video playback. Date stamped, December 14th, 2001A. Shaky handheld camera. A hotel room in the Caymans. Charles Bancroft stands by the window, arms crossed. Opposite him, David Reyes, visibly angry. David, you lied to me. You said this was charity work, Charles. It is. Just not for children, David. You're laundering money through fake nonprofits, using my name on the filings, Charles. And now your name is in too many places for you to pull out cleanly. David. I'll go public. Charles. Quietly. No, you won't. Video cuts. Elena stared at the screen, her stomach turning. Cassandra's voice was barely a whisper. This is the beginning of the end. The ghosts were real. The ledgers were full of names and crimes, and now Elena had the evidence to prove it. But if Charles Bancroft had buried this once, he would bury it again, unless she moved first. The room felt colder after the video ended, not because of the weather outside, but because of what they had just watched. Proof that Charles Bancroft had blackmailed Elena's father, threatened him, cornered him, and somehow, after all that, David Reyes disappeared. Elena stared at the paused frame of the video, the last clear shot of her father alive. His face worn but defiant. He was going to expose them, she whispered. And they made him disappear. Cassandra stood by the window, arms folded tight. We need more than a recording, she said. It's powerful, but it could be dismissed, deep-faked, staged. We need corroboration. And witnesses. Elena pulled a folder off the board. The string attached to it had always bothered her. It connected to one name, barely legible in the Orion board roster. C. Reyes. It hadn't matched any of the accountants or known employees. Elena had assumed it was a clerical error, until now. What if he didn't die? She said suddenly. Cassandra looked over. What? What if... My father disappeared on purpose? What if he faked his death to escape Bancroft? Elena, no, listen. What if this C. Reyes is him, hiding under a different name? It's not impossible. Cassandra was quiet. Then reluctantly, it's not. Elena's voice cracked. If he's alive, then I need to find him. I need to know. Int. Law Office, Midtown. Later that week a bell chimed as Elena stepped into the wood-paneled office of Avery Lang, a private estate lawyer known for handling quiet settlements for noisy families. Cassandra had arranged the meeting, an old favor from a time she'd exposed a political trust scam. Lang, a thin, silver-haired man with an expression like parchment, extended his hand. You must be David's daughter, he said gently. You knew him? Elena asked. I handled part of his affairs. After the fire? Lang said, gesturing for her to sit. Or more specifically, after the disappearance. He slid a document folder across the table. When your father died, someone tried to close all his accounts. But one was never touched. An encrypted trust account in Switzerland, co-signed with someone named C.M. Redwood. Elena stiffened. That was Charles Bancroft's alias. Lang nodded grimly. The trust hasn't been accessed since 2002, but here's the strange thing. Every 6 months, a power of attorney update was submitted under the name Cristobal Reyes. Elena's breath caught. That's not my father's full name. His was David Antonio Reyes. Lang leaned forward. Then someone's been operating under the Reyes name. And they're still alive. That night, Elena sat with Nico in the apartment, the folder in her lap. He was pale, lips chapped, his breathing more labored than usual. Do you think he's out there? Nico asked. Dad? I don't know, Elena said. But if he is, He's the only one who can tell me why he left us behind. Nico looked away. What if he didn't want to be found? Elena didn't answer. INT, Luxury Rehab Center, upstate New York, 2 days later through. A tip from Lang, and a lucky call to an old contact of Cassandra's, they tracked a trail of anonymous medical payments to a long-term facility nestled in the Catskills. The kind of place where rich families sent inconvenient relatives to quietly waste away. The patient's file was sealed, but the name on the intake form? Cristobal Reyes. Elena's hands trembled as she approached the nurse's station. Cassandra was at her side. Is he lucid? She asked. The nurse hesitated. Sometimes. They walked down a quiet hallway to room 412. The air smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Inside, a man sat by the window wrapped in a blanket, staring at the snow falling outside. His hair was gray. His posture stooped. But Elena knew that profile. Even after 20 years, she knew. Dad? She whispered. The man turned slowly and blinked. Elena? He said, voice hoarse. You found me. The next hour passed in silence, broken only by tears and broken sentences. Cassandra waited outside as Elena sat beside her father, or what was left of him. Why? She asked finally. Why did you let them think you were dead? David stared at the snow. Because they gave me a choice, he said. Disappear. Or they'd come after my children. Elena covered her mouth. They already knew about you, about Nico. They said if I went public, they'd take everything. So I chose silence. I chose exile. But you were going to expose them. The foundation. The money. David's eyes met hers, full of regret. I should have. I was afraid. Elena gripped his hand. You don't have to be anymore. He gave a faint smile. I'm not the one who can stop them now. You are. Meanwhile, Bancroft Tower. Same night, Victoria sat alone in her father's office. She played the video of David and Charles again, the same one sent to Elena. This time, she paused it on her father's face. Lying comes so easily to you, she said aloud. Behind her, Charles entered, unnoticed. She has the files, Victoria continued. The photos, the offshore trails, the recording. Charles poured himself a scotch. Then we remind her what happened to the last person who tried to bring this family down. Victoria turned. No, she said. What? We tried to bury David Reyes. It didn't work. And if we do the same to his daughter, it'll blow up in our faces. Charles raised an eyebrow. So what's your plan? She took a deep breath. We give her what she wants. Truth. In small doses. Manageable fallout. Then we spin it. Frame it as a tragic partnership gone wrong. Your compassion. Her father's idealism. Charles stared at her. And if she doesn't play along? Victoria turned to the skyline. Then we take everything from her. Legally, publicly, slowly. INT. Cassandra's loft. The next morning, Elena returned with a new fire in her eyes. Her father was alive. Her enemy was vulnerable. And the truth was finally within reach. She pinned a new note to the board. Bright red, confession on camera. Cassandra raised her eyebrows. You sure he's up for it? He has to be, Elena said. If he's willing to go on record, Cassandra said, that changes everything. Elena nodded. Then let's burn the whole damn house down. A storm rolled into the city the day the plan was set in motion. Not a metaphorical one, a real nor'easter, hammering Manhattan with sheets of freezing rain, howling winds and just enough chaos to blur lines, stall traffic and distract security teams. Inside Cassandra's loft, the atmosphere was surgical. Elena moved with quiet urgency, sorting files, placing labels, checking audio feeds. Her father, David Reyes, sat at the kitchen table, his hands trembling slightly as Cassandra fitted a discreet microphone to his shirt collar. Are you sure you want to do this? Cassandra asked, voice low. David nodded once. I've been quiet for too long. He looked up at his daughter. I should have stood up then. I'm standing up now, because you didn't let this die. Elena's throat tightened. She managed a nod. Then let's make sure the world hears you. INT. Community Press Center, Lower Manhattan, 417. The room was small, borrowed from an advocacy nonprofit Cassandra had once worked with. No security gates, no PR filters, just folding chairs, flickering fluorescent lights, and a single podium. The press invite had been simple. Former insider reveals offshore laundering scheme tied to Bancroft Financial. Hosted by Cassandra Wu. Featuring surprise whistleblower by 4:30 p.m. The room was packed, local journalists. A few mid-tier national outlets, 2 wire service reporters. Enough for a spark, enough to start a wildfire. Cassandra stepped to the podium. I want to thank you all for coming. Today, you'll hear from a man presumed dead for over 2 decades. A man who once worked directly with Charles Bancroft. 3. His name is David Reyes. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, then Elena stepped out beside him. David followed slowly, his gait uneven but determined. Flashbulbs erupted. Phones went up. Silence fell, and then David spoke. David, into mice. My name is David Reyes. In 2001, I was a consultant for the Orion Children's Foundation, a project I believed was created to fund developmental aid for children in Latin America and the Caribbean. I was wrong. It was a shell, designed by Charles Bancroft III, under the alias CM Redwood, to launder millions of dollars through fake grants, offshore accounts, and manipulated real estate ventures. I was complicit. I signed documents I didn't understand at first. But when I realized what was happening, I tried to stop it. And they came after me. They faked a fire. They faked my death. I went into hiding for 23 years to protect my children. But today, I'm done hiding. The room was stone silent. Cassandra took over. We have documentation to support every part of this testimony. Original photographs, financial records, signed transfer orders, and a full analysis from a third-party forensic accountant. All will be distributed immediately following this briefing, a reporter stood. Do you have any evidence that the current Bancroft leadership, Victoria Bancroft, was involved? Cassandra hesitated, then looked to Elena. Elena stepped forward. She's not just involved, she said clearly. She's been managing the cover-up since 2007, including offering me hush money just last week. Gasps. Pens scratched. Cameras zoomed in. Another reporter. Are you pursuing legal action? Yes, Elena said. And I'm not alone. Int. Bancroft Tower. Same time Victoria stood in front of a screen streaming the press conference live. Crane stood behind her, unmoving. When Elena appeared on screen, Victoria's jaw clenched. She wasn't supposed to do this yet, she hissed. We were going to manage the release. Crane said nothing. Then came David, alive, speaking, naming names. Victoria's fingers gripped the edge of the desk. I want everything on that facility. How he got out. Who helped? I want the leak traced and I want it now. Crane only nodded. But no threats, she added. Not this time. We go legal. Financial. Systemic. NT press room. Post-conference. The aftermath was chaos. Reporters swarmed Cassandra and David. Elena stayed at his side, shielding him as best she could. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Emails from journalists, voicemails from law firms, text messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. One text stood out. Unknown number. You're in over your head, Elena. They don't lose. They erase. She stared at the screen, then deleted the message. Not this time. Later that night, back at the loft, Cassandra poured 3 glasses of bourbon. To the beginning of the end, she said, raising hers. Elena didn't drink. She just stared out the window. This isn't over. David placed a hand on her shoulder. No, he said softly. But you just made them bleed, Cassandra added. And the story's live. Reuters picked it up. That means it'll hit AP, then Bloomberg. The fuse is lit. Elena nodded slowly, then turned back to the board on the wall, now reorganized. Tightened, ready for legal battle. At the center, she added one more photo, the picture from Kavanaugh's. Her father, Charles Bancroft, smiling, shaking hands. Above it, she wrote, "The deal they couldn't bury." The morning after the press conference, the city buzzed like a live wire. News outlets plastered the Reyes-Bancroft scandal across every screen and headline. Tweets trended. Online forums lit up. Even the most oblivious commuter knew the name David Reyes. But inside Bancroft Tower, the atmosphere was far from normal. Int. Bancroft Tower. Boardroom. 9 a.m. Victoria. Bancroft sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, flanked by the Bancroft family's senior executives. The usual polished calm had cracked, revealing sharp edges of panic and anger. Matthew Crane stood by the wall, arms crossed. Victoria's voice was cold steel. "We are facing a potential collapse of the family empire. This is more than a smear campaign. It's a coordinated attack on our legacy." Marcus Bancroft, her younger brother and CFO, slammed his fist on the table. "They've got documents, video, a witness. How do we fight that?" Victoria's gaze was unwavering. "We do what we always do. Control the narrative. Apply pressure on the media. Leverage our political allies. And find the weak links." Crane stepped forward. "We need a scapegoat. Someone inside who's willing to take the fall." Victoria smiled thinly. "Exactly. Someone expendable. EXT. Cassandra's loft. Same time Elena sat with Cassandra and her father. Scrolling through the flood of messages and news alerts, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Friends, family, even Nico's doctors checking in. But amid the support were veiled threats. "Drop this, Reyes, or lose everything." Elena clenched her jaw. "This is war," Cassandra said. "They'll come at us from every side." David nodded weakly. "They will. But now, the truth is out, and the public is watching." Ent. Bancroft Tower, CEO office. Late morning. Victoria picked up the phone. "Get me Senator Whitmore. Now." Seconds later, a sharp voice answered. "Victoria, what can I do for you?" "Senator, we need to talk about the Reyes story. It's about to spiral. We need a legislative distraction, something big, urgent, to shift the media's attention." There was a pause. "Consider it done." Int. Newsroom. Afternoon in a bustling TV studio, Elena's story competed for airtime. Breaking news. Senator Whitmore announces sudden investigation into environmental violations at a major energy company. Cassandra scowled. "They're buying time. Trying to bury this under a scandal." Elena's phone rang. "Dad's condition is worsening," Jamie said. Elena hung up and looked at Cassandra. "We have to keep pushing. But I can't do this alone." Ent. Legal firm. Evening, Elena met with Avery Lang and Marcus Day, a high-profile investigative attorney specializing in corporate fraud. Marcus was blunt. "This isn't just a corporate scandal. This is a well-oiled machine of corruption, money laundering, and cover-ups. You're poking a hornet's nest, but you'll help?" Elena asked. Marcus nodded. "We'll need all the evidence you can provide." "And more, including testimony." Elena swallowed. "My father is willing." Marcus smiled grimly. "That's the most dangerous and valuable thing you have." Int. Bancroft Tower. Security office. Night surveillance. Footage showed a shadowy figure entering the building after hours. The camera caught a glimpse of a face, partially obscured, but familiar. Victoria watched the monitor. "Send in the team," she ordered. "Find out what they're after." Int. Cassandra's loft. Night. The doorbell rang sharply. Elena opened it to find two suited men. "We're with the FBI," one said. "You need to come with us." Her heart pounded. "On what grounds?" They showed a warrant, sealed but legitimate. "You're being investigated for allegations of corporate espionage." Elena's mind raced. "This is a setup," Cassandra whispered behind her. As the rain beat against the windows, Elena realized the war had only just begun, and the blood in the boardroom was about to spill into her world. The sound of sirens outside mingled with the pounding rain. Elena sat on the worn couch. the two FBI agents standing awkwardly nearby, flipping through files and laptops. "This is a misunderstanding," Cassandra said firmly, stepping between Elena and the agents. "We're the ones exposing a decades-long criminal conspiracy." The senior agent, a grizzled man with weary eyes, looked at Cassandra. "We're aware of the Bancroft investigation, but the corporate espionage claim came from an anonymous source with documentation. We have to investigate all leads." Elena's mind raced. This was exactly what Victoria had planned. Bury the truth beneath layers of legal chaos. Interrogation room, FBI field office. Later, Elena sat alone, the harsh light casting shadows on the pale walls. Across from her, an agent slid a folder forward. "Your fingerprints were found on restricted documents inside Bancroft Tower." Elena clenched her fists. "I got those documents legally." The agent leaned in. "Proof?" She shook her head. Bancroft Tower, Victoria's office. Same time, Victoria watched the live feed of Elena's interrogation on a secure monitor. She smiled thinly. "Pressure works," she murmured. "Keep the heat on. We break her." Marcus stepped in. "We need to move faster. The media cycle is shifting. People are starting to question Bancroft's narrative." Victoria tapped her fingers. "Good. Let them doubt. Then we'll strike with the truth. Our truth." Loft. Night Cassandra paced while David rested in the back room, visibly weaker, but still determined. Elena's phone buzzed. A text appeared. "You're playing a dangerous game." Miss Reyes attached was a video clip. Elena clicked and saw a security camera feed of Cassandra meeting with an unknown man. A pang of betrayal stabbed her chest. "Who is that?" Elena whispered. Cassandra's face was unreadable. "A contact. Someone who might help. But this is bigger than us." Newsroom. Next day, Elena and Marcus Day sat with a journalist, Sarah Mills, at a small cafe. "We need to expose not just the financial fraud, but the systemic cover-up," Elena said, "including the political ties." Sarah nodded. "I've been digging into Senator Whitmore's donations. They trace back to Bancroft Holdings." Marcus pulled out a file, and here, internal memos linking the foundation to offshore lobbying firms. The weight of evidence was growing. Bancroft. Tower. Security office. Naitha. Shadowy figure from before was revealed, a young man in a maintenance uniform. He moved swiftly through the halls, slipping a USB drive into a computer. "Almost done," he whispered. Suddenly, footsteps approached. He froze. FBI field office. Interrogation room. Later Elena's interrogation was cut short. Her lawyer, Marcus Day, burst in. "You're not to be detained further," he said sharply. Elena stood, trembling but relieved. Cassandra's loft. Night, Elena." Cassandra and David gathered around the board, plotting their next move. The truth was coming out, but so was the danger. Elena looked at her father. "Why did you stay silent all these years?" David sighed. "Because sometimes silence is the only way to survive." As the rain finally eased, the city below seemed to hold its breath, because the battle for justice was far from over, and the lines between friend and foe were beginning to blur. The night was colder than usual, slicing through Elena's jacket like a blade as she walked the dim streets back to the loft. Her phone vibrated, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A hushed, urgent voice whispered, "If you want to protect your family, don't trust Cassandra." The line went dead. Cassandra's loft." Later, Elena burst inside, heart racing. Cassandra looked up from her laptop. "What's wrong?" Elena's voice cracked. "Someone warned me, said you're not who you say you are." Cassandra's eyes narrowed. "You don't believe that?" Elena shook her head, pain flashing across her face. "I have to know the truth." Coffee shop. Next day, Elena sat across from Marcus Day and Avery Lang. Her legal team. "I'm losing control," Elena admitted. Marcus nodded grimly. "There's a mole. Someone feeding Bancroft intel." Avery added, and it might be closer than you think. Int. Cassandra's loft. Knight Elena confronted Cassandra again. This is bigger than any of us, Cassandra said quietly. But I'm on your side. Suddenly, the power flickered. The room plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, Cassandra's laptop was missing. Int. Bancroft Tower, security room. Same time Victoria and Crane watched footage of a masked figure stealing the laptop. Victoria smiled coldly. Now, we have the upper hand. Int. Elena's loft. Late night Elena sat alone, the weight of betrayal crushing her. A new message appeared on her phone. Trust no one, not even family. She stared at the words, heartbreaking. The fight for truth was now a fight for survival, and the greatest betrayal was yet to come. The conference room in the downtown courthouse was packed to the brim. Cameras lined the walls, journalists murmured in anticipation, and the city's most powerful eyes were fixed on the podium at the front. Elena stood with David and Cassandra by her side, flanked by Avery Lang and Marcus Day. Their faces were a blend of exhaustion, determination, and hope. Across the room sat Victoria Bancroft. Her poised mask cracked, revealing sharp anxiety beneath. Crane was beside her, silent but alert. Elena, addressing the courtroom. For over 20 years, my family's name has been buried beneath lies, deception, and corruption orchestrated by the Bancroft dynasty. Today we present the truth. With a nod, Avery projected a series of images on the screen. The infamous photograph from Kavanaugh's, now fully authenticated, showing David Reyes with Charles Bancroft Sr. Next came the documents. Ledgers, offshore account maps, email chains revealing cover-ups, and a damning confession from the secondary villain, Marcus Bancroft, Victoria's cousin, who had secretly turned witness. Gasps filled the room as the evidence unfolded. Marcus Bancroft, confessing on video, I was part of it. I helped conceal the truth. I'm sorry for what I did. It's time to set things right. The judge's gavel hit the bench sharply. Given the overwhelming evidence, this court orders immediate restructuring of Bancroft Financial Holdings. Legal restitution will be made to the Reyes family, and criminal investigations will proceed against those involved. Outside, the press exploded with the news. Elena's story had finally shattered the fortress. Later, Loft Elena looked out at the sunrise filtering through the windows. David by her side. I never thought I'd see this day. David smiled, frail but proud. You made it happen. Cassandra entered, holding a framed copy of the restored photo. To new beginnings, she said. Elena carefully hung it on the wall, a symbol of truth reclaimed. Int. Bancroft Tower, Victoria's office, Victoria. Packed her belongings. She paused, staring at a photo of her father and David Reyes, no longer enemies, but victims of a tangled past. Her voice was quiet. Maybe some legacies deserved to end. The fight for justice had cost much, but it had given back even more. The truth, at last, was free.